My name is Dr. Richard Wallace. I'm an adjunct associate professor at the University of Illinois in the Department of Animal Sciences. I'm also a senior veterinarian for Pfizer Animal Health and the Dairy Technical Services team. We're going to look at PCDART now, and we're going to look at it from how we can evaluate reproduction on the dairy. And the first place I like to start, very similar to how we would do udder health or milk production, is look at the report that we might get on a printout from DHI, which typically is on the 202 report. And the place that we first can look at that again in PCDART is if we start up with the overview screen and we hit the print report, you can see that there is a 801 herd summary on reproduction. Another way we can get that information is right-click over here in the right window, and if it doesn't start up with the test day information, test day statistics, you have to make sure that this box is checked. So if you have a blue screen over here in PCDART and or aqua screen there, you can check that box and then right-click in this category, and there again you can find the reproduction tab for the 801 report. Again, all this information, 801, 802, and 803, would be found on that printout that you would get from a DHI report on a monthly basis. The third place we can find this reproductive information is on the Reports tab, and then under a tab set of reports called Reproductive Management. And here you'll find an 801 herd summary report. Now, you'll also see that I have several different other reports added into my report set. And that's a nice feature you can have to organize your reports so you can find anything that's related to reproductive management. So again, the first place I start on reproductive management is this 801 herd summary. You have the option here to select different test days in the past or the most recent test day. And we can also break this out by breed or string. And in the case of the University of Illinois dairy herd, which we're using as an example herd here today, the Holstein herd would be string number 1, and Jerseys would be string 2. But because the way reproduction is managed at the university herd, it's not breed specific, so we're going to basically use all breeds and all strings, and we're going to evaluate this report then based on everybody that's in the herd. You can select the herd and hit preview, or another way to do this is just to double click on that 801 report, and you'll see that that report pops up, and then we can print this out or we can use this evaluation with the producer sitting with them. When you look at this 801 report, first thing you want to notice is that the voluntary waiting period is listed at 70 days, and then this top chart here that you have is actually the summary of the current breeding herd. So that it would count only the cows that are through the voluntary waiting period and currently being serviced and not confirmed pregnant. So this is the current breeding herd. Once they're confirmed pregnant, they're no longer listed in this chart. So it's important, if you don't see values listed in here, it's probably because they're either not confirming cows pregnant in PCDART and you don't have that data for you. So you can see we have actually 62 cows that are past the voluntary waiting period that are in the current breeding herd and have not been confirmed pregnant. You've got some categories here to determine how many cows or what percent of the breeding herd are between voluntary waiting period and 100 days, over 100 days, and the number that are diagnosed open. The average days to first service for the current breeding herd is 77 days. This does not break it out by lactation number or any other breakdown, but it gives you an idea where you're sitting with the current number of cows in the herd that you're in your active breeding herd. The next set of charts looks at the summary of the total herd and where we're at. As you look at the university herd, remember 70 days in milk is the voluntary waiting period. You can see between the voluntary waiting period and 100 days, roughly 93% of the cows get their first service. So we're on a very strict timed AI program, and you can see that only 7% of the herd, mostly heifers, there's 11 heifers here that are over 100 days at the time they get their first service. Some of this is probably due to some anestrus, and some of those heifers, if they're milking pretty heavy, we're not getting cyclicity out of those heifers. And you can see no animals are bred less than 70 days. So a very tight synchrony when you see a herd like this that's using a very strict timed AI program. When you look at the average days to first service, Even though 70 days in milk is our voluntary waiting period, on average we're getting them serviced by 80 days in milk, so roughly half of an estrus cycle. And if you think about it, not all cows are going to be at 70 days in milk at the beginning of a timed AI program if you're doing it weekly. So we're pretty close there with within 70 days in milk as far as the voluntary waiting period. My goal is to have 80% of the cows bred within 21 days of the voluntary waiting period, and you can see we're hitting almost 93. The services per pregnancy and services per cow are very good in this herd. Less than 2 services per pregnancy in the pregnant cows, and a little over 2, but under 3 when you look at all cows, which would include repeat breeders. The calving interval then, and it's going to be around 13 and a half months with about 128 days open. Again, excellent information, excellent data. And when you look at these older cows, that's actually really good. The heifers tend to be a little bit longer, and some of these heifers that are delayed first service, or some of that is a little bit intentional. Again, if they aren't cycling well, we wait until they start cycling and breed them, but you aren't going to get them pregnant anyway if they aren't cycling. As we scroll down to some of the charts here in the bottom of this 802 report, 801 report, we have a conception rate report here. It's by first service, second service, and third service. You have the number of breedings that are performed in a 12-month basis, and then you also have the net merit dollars of the service sires. So we're using over $400 bulls on average, and some of them are even a little bit higher on a net merit dollar standpoint. The dry cow profile sits down here in the lower left-hand corner. Tells you how many dry periods we have in second lactation animals as well as third and greater, the average days dry, and then what is the distribution, how many cows were shorter than 40 days or longer than 70, with ideally having most of the cows a 40 to 70 day dry period. The university herd uses about a 49 to 56 day dry period is what we're shooting for there. Cows are dried off once a week. The last thing is the yearly reproductive summary, where we can look at month to month from test day standpoint, the percent of heats, the number of services, and the percent that are successful, so sort of the conception. What you have to keep in mind, though, is that these intervals are variable based on test day intervals. So we are testing roughly once a month there, but sometimes if the interval gets a little bit long, some of these numbers are going to a little bit skewed. So we're going to look at the 21-day preg rate report, the 126 report here in a minute. That's probably a more appropriate way to look at the conception rate because it is a very calibrated timing between 21-day cycles. I do use this information, though, if I'm looking at it from a management standpoint, to see how many cows I have pregnant in the herd. So with a little over 200 cows and about 180 to 190 milking, I like to maintain at least 100 pregnant animals in the herd. And so you can see we're pretty much running that 100 pregnant animals on a monthly basis as we work down through with the number that are calving. Okay, so that kind of finishes up how I would evaluate the 801 report. That gets you kind of a rough basis on where we're sitting within the herd. I'm going to go over to the herd graphs first, and then we'll come back and finish up with the 21-day preg rate report. And so in the herd graphs here, you can see again it's broken out by udder health, production and nutrition, and then reproduction. So here you might want to take a look at this chart here, days to first service and minimum average days open. And so as I chart that graph, you can see that we go back in time, almost 3 years, back to 2009, and the purple line here is going to be the average days open as time has progressed. So you can see it's not a very steady number, but here over the last year, you can see we've had a pretty steady, right around 125 days open. And again, I won't go back through the history on why things went up and down, but basically you can see that they've been pretty steady with a little blip up here in the last test day. You do notice that the bottom line here is the days in milk at first service. And so you can see it was down around 70 days in milk. And prior to this point in time, our voluntary waiting period was 60 days. So when we moved our voluntary waiting period up 10 days, you can see that it has now climbed up a little bit. But with that said, the days open has not gone up as well. So that's actually a pretty good sign when you start thinking about it. From 70 days in milk, we're getting most of them pregnant within 2 heat cycles of that first service. The two different lines here are the breeding herd and, again, the total herd. So if you remember, we broke that out on that 801 report. So the breeding herd would just be those 62 cows that are currently in the herd versus where we're at historically with the cows that are also confirmed pregnant. Close that one down. Another chart that I might look at in this is maybe percent successful by service. And you can see that's a little bit up and down, but you can actually select this off and just go to first service. And so to see where we're at on first service conception rate. And you can see some ups and downs. It's a smaller herd, so there's going to be some variation because you might have only a few cows bred on each month on a first service. But if we look over the last year, it looks like it's been pretty good, running up in that 40% range. Don't worry about this last value that is 0 because DHI doesn't record. Obviously on test day you don't have these first service confirmations back, so they're all listed as open. But you can see we did have a little bit of fall off in the summer here, so that value at 22% on the August test day on first service is probably very real. But in particular from a heat stress standpoint, I'm not too worried about it. So those are just some of the charts you might look at that are herd graphs. The other thing I might look at then are these cow graphs from reproduction and days in milk as of first breeding. So if we put that chart up, again, I'm going to uncheck the regression line. I'm going to put it by lactation number. And there you can see that there's a string of first lactation animals that have not that had their first service later. And now I do recall actually what happened was the herd was saving back some first lactation heifers as recipients for a brown Swiss flush, and so these heifers did not get bred on their original time. So there's our voluntary weaning period sitting at 70 days. So if I bring this down to 70, you can see that we're pretty much consistently staying above 70. So that's probably what these are. These were all heifers, and so that would explain why we had 11 heifers that were not serviced within 100 days in milk. They were actually delayed because they were saved back for recipients. But it's a good graph to look at from a compliance standpoint to see how close we are between getting animals bred at the time we want with a 70-day voluntary waiting period. I'll close that one down. The other one I might look at here is days open. So again, uncheck that regression line. Some of these abnormal values that are in here, if we go to the filter button and we just look at cows that are in milk, doesn't include any cull cows. Now that cleans that up a little bit, gets rid of the dry cows. And then we might partition this. Let's do it by reproductive status. And then I'll throw the get that out of the way, and then I'll move this bar down here. So remember, 70 days in milk is our voluntary waiting period. So you can see that we've got a fair number. The purple triangles are going to be our pregnant cows. These blue diamonds are cows that are bred but not confirmed pregnant yet. And then the green ones are cows that have been confirmed open or are open and have not passed the voluntary waiting period and not bred yet. So again, you can see a pretty nice pattern where we're getting several of these cows pregnant on that first service within the voluntary waiting period. And then you can see a scattering of second and third service. You know, that's one way to take a look at reproduction, but one of the very valuable features that PCDART has is the trackers. And from a reproductive standpoint, we have actually a tracker called Conception Tracker. I'm going to select that right now. And we're actually going to move back in time, and I'm going to move back to August 31st of 2012, and I'm going to just do it for a year. So September 1st of 2011 to August 31st of 2012. I'm going to look at that date range, and I'm moving it back to August is because I know that from the data set that I have confirmed pregnancies through the entire month of August. You know, actually maybe you don't even have those from August. So I'm going to move back one more month just to make sure I have pregnancies. So August 1st through July 31st. Again, real easy to make those changes. We're going to look at all the cows that are greater than or equal to first lactation. And I'm just going to go ahead and preview that graph real quick. Now, numbers, it's just a bunch of numbers as far as sitting down and viewing this with a producer, or if you're viewing this yourself. So I like to click over to this icon up here, this graphical icon, and it gives us some very colorful graph here, but we need to sit down and interpret this. So one of the first things you might do is uncheck the preg and uncheck the number bred. And this gives us a percent conception by month. So August of last year, we only got 19% of the cows that we serviced pregnant. Then it jumped up to 40, 48. So pretty good conception rates, almost 60% conception rate in March of 2012. And then if you remember, things started getting hot, and you can see the decline as the heat stress came in, but still 26% of the cows getting pregnant. Now, to make sure that those percentage values are actually credible, you might want to add in the number of cows that were bred in each one of these intervals. So we were only breeding 26 cows in August of 2011, but we bred 62 cows in October. If we go over here to the month that we had 60% conception rate, we had 44 cows bred that month. So it's important to look at the numbers, the denominator that's going in there, and then the numerator would be the green ones, and that's the number of cows pregnant. So 5 out of 26 is going to be your 19%. If we go to our really good month here in March, 26 pregnancies out of 44 breedings, and we had almost 60%. So one really nice way to look at this information is breaking this down from a month-to-month standpoint and see how things progress. One thing I'll show you in this herd is if we look at breedings by day of the week, so we can change this view. And if you select day of the week and hit change view, and we look at the graphical information, this looks at the number of cows that were bred and successfully pregnant by day of the week over the last 12 months. And this will be the 12 months from August 1st through July 31st of 2011 to 2012. So no cows bred on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday or Thursday. 2 cows bred on Friday, 2 pregnancies for 100% pregnancy rate. So that conception rate is really not a valid thing when you only have 2 animals bred, and no cows bred on Sunday. So you can see that we breed nearly 100% of the cows on Saturday. So as I look at this information, that tells me that this herd is strictly a time-day eye herd with very little heat detection being done. But again, running about a 44% overall conception rate on cows in this herd, first, second, third service, first, second, and third lactation. If I close that down and close this again, we can actually break this down by breedings. So if I want to just look at first service cows, I'd go to the breeding filters. I said just first service, and then we can stay by month. And now I can graphically look at what our first service pregnancy risk has been. So we didn't have any first services in August of 2011, but we've been running 50, 50, 38, 64. So you can see fairly good first service conception rate in this dairy. So again, this tracker gives us a lot of ability to do a lot of different dividing and slicing and dicing. I can do it by technician. So if we want to take a look at the different technicians, I didn't change the view. So here we have a technician. So we have technician 0 has only bred 3 animals, so really you might not want to look at that one, but the key breeders are breeder number 1, 3, and 9. And so you can see breeder 9 had 52% conception rate, while breeder 1 had about 46, so pretty good conception rate. So just too many different ways for me to show this from a slice and dice analysis, but this conception tracker is really an excellent way to really divide up and look at reproduction on the dairy. One last report I want to show you from reproductive standpoint is the pregnancy rate summary. Any of you that might be viewing this and have used dairy comp, this would be very similar to the bred sum command. So I'm going to go ahead and move the date of the vet check to the last vet check. We're going to look at 12 months of data. We preg check animals on the dairy at 35 days, so we're going to use a 36-day preg rate, but as far as earliest that we might preg check, we have a 70-day voluntary waiting period. We're going to look at this information by date, and then if I preview this, you'll be able to see what the typical 21-day preg rate looks like. And if I scroll down a little bit further, you can see we're at 23% overall 21-day preg rate over the last 12 months. So you have each month's worth, or each one of these intervals is a 21-day interval. And this date represents the last day of that 21-day interval. So this interval would have started October 2nd of 2011. And then for 21 days, there were 45 eligible animals to be bred. 32 of them were serviced for a 71% estrus detection rate. Of those 45 that were eligible for breeding, 44 were eligible for pregnancy. We got 14 of those cows pregnant for the 32% preg rate for that 21-day interval. And then later on, of those 14 cows that were confirmed pregnant, we actually had 3 of them that lost those pregnancies or came back in open. So this abort is the cows that were confirmed open at a later time. And so you can see how the data then is generated over 12 months to give you that 23% preg rate that's currently going on in the herd as of the 9/23 vet check date. That's pretty much how I evaluate reproduction on dairies. There's several other graphs we can look at from a conception rate summary and AI technician, but I think that gives you a pretty good overview of herd evaluation on reproduction.